Most leaders experience a crisis a few times in her or his career. We learn from watching and we learn from doing, but there is something innate within some leaders that allows them to think calmly and clearly during a crisis. Even more importantly, the very best leaders in a crisis situation are those who create calm amidst a storm. My guest today does just that.
Welcome to the Leaders Perspective Podcast. Where we talk to triple threat leaders about the people, products, trends, and experiences that influence business. I'm now pleased to introduce your host, Jason Goldberg.
Welcome back to the Leaders Perspective Podcast, where we engage with triple threat leaders to learn about their lives, careers, and leadership philosophies, and chat with our guests about a hot topic in society. As a reminder, a triple threat leader is one who embodies the very best of leadership and who has strong IQ, EQ, and DQ, intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, and decency quotient. Today we welcome a very special guest. She is someone I personally admire, and she is a hero to many. Danielle Dwyer Garavito, known to her friends as Danny, is a leader who wears many hats. She is the Senior Territory Business Manager of Cardiovascular Sales for Bristol Myers Squibb. She is a Senior Paramedic with Westchester EMS in New York, and a Senior Paramedic and member of the Marine Medic Division with Greenwich Emergency Medical Services in Connecticut. If that's not enough, Danny is also a New York State Certified Instructor Coordinator, which basically means she teaches new EMTs and offers continuing education classes to current EMTs. She is also the mom to two adorable kids. All right, welcome, Danny. Thanks for joining us on the Leader's Perspective. So I know we've had a chance to work together for about 5 years now. Not sure if many people know, but I'm a volunteer EMT in Westchester, and I've personally always respected and admired your style in working, and I think it's just you're incredibly unique in your field in that you're constantly providing providing exceptional patient care. You remain cool under pressure, but you're always focusing on creating calm for the patient and for the patient's family. And you know, I think that absolutely makes a triple threat leader. So glad to have you today.
Well, thank you. That's all very nice things to say, and I truly appreciate it. I do take great pride in the work that I do going out there to help. And I think the reality is that we have to remember that we're there to help. It's not our crisis, it's somebody else's crisis. There's a reason that they've reached out for it. And I think many of us have an inherent, want to be able to help others. And then others probably do it for a different reason, whether that's to make themselves a better person, to find ways to do something that is unique, to increase their skill set. But it is crisis to crisis, right?
Absolutely.
Every day. And it's not all blood. It's not all blood and guts. A lot of what we do is social work and simply just letting people talk and explain what their problems are so that we can find a solution to them.
For sure. I think that's a great way to put it. So tell us about yourself. Where are you from? What are your hobbies?
Wow.
How do you feel your days?
Yep. So I was raised in northern Westchester, little town called Katona. I was the mayor's daughter. I knew everybody, which was great. And I think that's why I like working as a paramedic. You get to know so many different people. But right now living over in Connecticut. I have two young children and married. And we are having a great time this summer. So a lot of outside stuff, pool, trips coming up and everything else. Just family life is oh so important. I would say that's pretty much like my hobbies right
That's
now.
Great.
School. And
Very
things.
nice. And so tell us about your journey. In the intro, I gave an intro to your background, spoke about what you do for in the cardiovascular sales field and paramedicine. So what came first? How did you get here?
Actually, I came into what I do now because when I went away to college at the University of Maryland, Greek life was very big down there. You either join a sorority or a fraternity, and that wasn't me. I wasn't into Greek life. So I tried to find another place where I could go, a group that I could join. I ended up joining the College Park Volunteer Fire Department, which was directly across the street, across Route 1. And that became my fraternity. We actually used to have T-shirts that said Pi Rho in the Greek letters. But besides forming friendships and everything else, it's really what truly got me into EMS, especially in a unique urban area such as Prince George County, Maryland, where it is so completely diverse and all different pockets of people and stuff that I really liked the idea of being able to see something different and unique each and every time. You never know what EMS is going to bring you. And that's how I got into EMS. And I did that for several years, actually a couple of years down there, and realized after I got hired by the fire department that I could go do this anywhere, and I yearned to go back home. So I came back to the New York area and got hired in Greenwich, Connecticut as a paramedic. That's where I met my husband.
Nice.
He was my partner on an ambulance, believe it or not.
I didn't know that.
And from there, it sort of morphed into sales. It was an old EMS boss who found me and came back to me and he said, I have a job for you. Like, you need to go after this job in sales. And he said, you are a people person and you're able to communicate effectively with others. And so what I did was that led me into sales. And I really think a lot of what I do in sales every single day is reflected in how I handle a call in EMS and finding what is important to the patient, just like what is important to my customers at work, and how can
So what
I
are you
help?
selling?
How
What do you do?
I'm selling a blood thinner at this time for Bristol Myers Squibb. I've always sold in the cardiovascular arena. So whether it was with an antiplatelet, a hyperlipidemia medication, and right now I'm selling what's called a DOAC, for lack of a better term, one of the newer blood thinners out on the market.
Very interesting. So you mentioned that your roles overlap, and I found the same in my career. Tell me how that works, how that comes about, and what you the benefits of each position that you bring to the other part of your life.
So I think in sales, you walk, or at least I walk in blinded sometimes, especially if it's a customer that I don't know. A lot of my customers, though, I have known for about 20 years, but there are new ones always coming into the area. And having that conversation, trying to feel out in just a few minutes of time, what is their social style? How do they accept information? How do they exchange information? What works best for them? Are they someone who is a driver and is going to run what our conversation is, or is it someone who's willing to sit back and listen and wants to be friendly and know about my kids in my life before there's any type of a decision made? And I think in EMS, a lot of it's the same. We walk into these situations where we don't know what we're getting, what the person is like, what their daily what their daily activities are, anything else like that. And it really is important in those first minute or two. I hate to say that we're biased in one way or another, but we really do have to make some really quick decisions on how we're going to approach this patient or this person. And when that doesn't work, being able to back yourself out of that conversation and figure out in that next couple of seconds, all right, let me approach this from a different perspective. And I think it's that ebb and that flow that we have with our patients and our customers on a daily basis that allow the conversation to happen, but also allow us to actively listen and not necessarily respond to everything that they say, but let them know that we're taking interest in what they say. And then how can we best help them?
Very nice. All right. So you teach a lot, right? You in your world, you're teaching new and current EMTs. You're preceptor to paramedics who are going through training. What are your leadership philosophies in general? And honestly, when you show up on every scene, you have to take charge from a medical perspective and direct what might be 2 or a dozen different people. So how do you think about that?
I think making each call or anything that we do, making it a teaching opportunity for others is important. I think that's what keeps people engaged and wanting to come back for more. So whether I'm teaching on a call or whether I'm teaching in a classroom in EMS, and I'm also a district sales trainer in my sales job, is making people feel that they are engaged and that what they have to say is important, and what their thoughts and their opinions. And it may not be the right choice that we're making on a call in that moment, but at some point talking about it and saying, what could we have done better? Or what did you like about what happened on the call, or what didn't go so well, and how are we able to improve? In EMS, there are, algorithms, and there's protocols, and there's ways that we handle certain situations. A trouble breathing, a chest pain, stroke patient, whatever the call is. But what it really does is it provides an opportunity. Everyone has the structure, but how we best implement skills or interactions or moving the patient, from point A to point B. But the joke in our house here is that a lot of times we may be viewed as, FedEx workers. Our job is to move a package from point A to point B. But the reality is that our packages talk and have feelings. And even people in a classroom setting or a learning environment, each one of those students has feelings and want to feel like they're being heard. And if they're able to engage in the conversation and partake in the hands-on stuff, it really does make them feel that they are completely involved, rather than a student that sits there in the back with their arms crossed, like, I don't want to be here. That's someone we need to reach out to. And I think even on calls, we need to reach out to people and get them more engaged, so that they feel like they really are truly
right. So you talk about calls in a very calm way, right? And you've been doing this for a long time, and I think most people who are listening don't have the full framing of what these situations might look like. But you have, somebody, whether it's the patient themselves or a family member or bystander, makes the decision to call 911. And in that moment, that patient is probably experiencing a significant amount of fear. Right? What am I experiencing right now, and what am I about to go through when that ambulance arrives, and in the journey to the hospital, and then at the hospital, what's going to happen to me? And they make that decision that they need help. And then there's a gap. There's that amount of time from when they call 911 until when the ambulance arrives and the paramedic arrives. And that fear sometimes amplifies during that downtime. At least that's what I've heard from some patients. And then you arrive, and you have sometimes nervous patients, you have nervous family members, bystanders. So your pager goes off, you get to the scene. What's going through your mind en route, right? What's going through your mind when you get to a scene? Because it's their crisis.
Why is there so much traffic?
Why are they not moving when I have my siren on, right?
Right. But I think walking up to the scene, we always do that scene survey and just get a general impression. But walking in the door and that patient sitting there looking at you and everything else, I actually do use the word, hi, what's up? What is going on? How can I help? Because I do think that puts people at ease, as opposed to coming in like, oh, you're having chest pain. I'm here to help you. But I think you have to have that relaxed attitude or that relaxed persona. Because if you get excited, well, then they're just going to get even more excited. And you hit the nail on the head before when you said, a lot of times it's the family members or the loved ones or the friend, whomever is there, that really are the ones that are excited. And those usually are like the second patient, right? The person you have to calm down more so. The assessment portion though is usually always the same. You get through your patient assessment, and that really does allow yourself, I think, to stay calm, because you're working through in your head, what steps do I need to take? Now, granted, there is flex with that, but I think even with the flex, we still follow, what it is that we're supposed to do. I always tell my students, don't go down a rabbit hole.
Right.
As much as you want your patient to talk to you and give you information, it's important for you to keep your steps in line in your head. And you need to drive the conversation. But again, it's figuring out what information is important to the patient. Sometimes they want to tell you certain things right up front. Listen to them, but then go back and do the steps that you're supposed to in the order of which they are.
So you touched on something a moment ago. You said survey the scene, and it's something that's just so natural to many of us in this field. But that survey, I whenever I teach a CPR class, I jokingly, I say, stop, survey the scene, use all of your senses, sight, hearing, smell, sometimes touch, understand, just don't taste, right? and and figure out what's going on. And unlike TV, nobody's ever running into a scene, except the new guy sometimes, and then we have to grab them by the back of the shirt. But that to me translates so much to the corporate world, the business world. I don't care what field you're in, because whenever there's a crisis, oftentimes people will overreact rather than taking a moment and observing what's going on to try to assess what's going on. Because how many scenes have you come across where you know what's going on immediately based on your survey?
Absolutely. And I think even in your initial assessment, or what we call in our world of EMS, initial assessment, but that general impression of what do I see, number one, like sick or not sick, right? I'm smiling, my color's good, I'm laughing. I always say to my students, or even people I'm riding with, if they catch on to my sarcasm, I know things are pretty good in that moment, right? It's the people who have what we call lights on, eyes open, but there's no one home. They're not responding to you in the way that they should be responding to you. I also think too that, when there is a crisis, we don't need to recreate the wheel. A lot of us have done this a long time and have the experience behind us that the wheel is there. The question is, how are you going to move that wheel forward? Or in the line of EMS, how are you going to move the bus forward, the ambulance forward, and get them to the hospital? But remembering that, again, there's a procedure, there's a way to do it, and you have to walk the patient through that journey. That's the word you've used. You have to walk them through their journey, help them through this journey, A, B, C, and the steps even after that.
So many times on these calls, because when we work in this field, we work in, you cover a very large territory that is 20 miles from north to south, right?
So it is
broken into zones.
In total, the 45 zone, yes, what you know is the 45 zone. It's approximately 8 towns and it's about 230 square miles.
So there are obviously times where you get on scene and you work with ambulance crews, EMTs, firefighters, police officers who you've never seen before, you've never met before. Everyone's been trained, hopefully to the same standards, but very often you're putting people together who don't know one another. How do you manage that? How do you pull teams together that have never worked together before and lead those teams, and at the same time, I know this is a compound question, but at the same time, create calm?
Yeah, so if you ask me to define my job in one phrase, I am ringmaster of a 3-ring circus. In essence, right? The EMS, fire, and the police as well, but making people realize that our goal at the end is the same, number one. Number two is figuring out, or even sometimes knowing what a person's strengths are or what their weaknesses are. There will be times in speaking to a patient that I realize that I'm not the person they want to talk to. And it can be because maybe I am a female. They don't want to interact with a female in that moment, as crazy as that sounds, but maybe they prefer to talk to a man. And realizing that, the patient has already found a connection or has an affinity towards, the male officer who might be standing there, and getting him involved into it. Sometimes there's even coaching, though, of that officer. But the reality is that it's important for us to realize that in that moment, we all have the same goal. Sometimes it's also giving people who tend to get in my way or get in the way of getting the patient to step B or C, setting them out on a job. I need you to go fetch this, please, or go get this out of the ambulance, because I do need them out of the situation. There have been times that the EMTs have walked in the door behind me, and I know the patient's not doing well, that knowing that there's so many people showing up to the house or the scene, and the EMTs come in the door and they're all happy to be there, like, hey, paramedics, I'm here. And I'm like, just shh for a second, because that patient does require one person in the moment. So it's important to know what each scenario or scene requires, or how can we best get this done.
So what's your way, right? I've been saying a lot that you keep people calm and you educate at the same time. How do you create calm amidst the storm?
I think calm for me is letting everybody have their space to do what their job requires. So as an EMT, they should be coming in the door. They've been trained to do a patient assessment, take a set of vitals, ask the basic questions and everything else. And I did this just the other day too, where I noticed that we were in the scene and I walked in and the EMTs were doing what they needed to do, right? They're doing the patient assessment. And I literally just stood there and I said nothing. And it was one of those things where at the end, as we're moving the patient out the door, I said to them, you know what? You guys are doing a great job. And they're like, well, do you have stuff you need to do? I said, no, you're doing a great job. The calm is me not coming in as like a gangbuster and taking over the scene. The calm is me really letting people have their space to do what needs to be done. And I think that gives them the confidence, and that also gives the confidence to the patient that these are competent people that are here to help me. The phrase of, as long as you're nice to people, they'll forget what you did wrong. But the reality is too, in that moment, if people seem to know what they're doing, there is a calm that does come over in that moment. And even with a loved one, letting them get involved. Can you please get me a list of medication? He's going to need some clothes when he gets to the hospital. Can you please pack a bag? We're going to need those things that we will need to make them feel that they truly are involved in the situation.
I think what I found is tone in interacting with everyone, whether it's my colleagues or whether it's patient or their families, goes a long way. So that if I'm in some cases, just serious and decisive, I'm getting a certain reaction. In some cases, I can introduce some levity to the situation and I get a different reaction. But if I show the slightest bit of uncertainty or panic, that's going to be infused into the situation. That's terrible. So I have to be in control of my emotions and understand the emotions of everyone else around to try to drive what I'm feeling into them. And I think that's something important that I've seen, the very best providers do that. So.
Right, and you'll see that in the morning at my house at 7:30 when that bus is coming down the street, right? Let's go! Right. I lose my kids, you can see the panic on their face in that moment. Their shoes aren't on, they don't know where anything is, and the reality is their shoes could be sitting there right in front of them, but they don't see them, right? Because panic takes over. And I think when panic takes over in a situation, we're blind. We don't see anything, right? We see red in that moment. And we got to get ourselves out of that red zone that we put ourselves into and work into more of a yellow zone where at least we're a bit more calm, or even a green zone, like, hey, I am good to go. I'm walking out the door, Mom, and I'm getting to the bus. And I think it's important for us to remember we have to get ourselves back into that green zone, all the time.
Accel Advisors expert consultants are all veteran operators who bring real solutions to your business challenges. Contact us at info@accel-advisors.com to reach our experts today.
All right, welcome back to the Leader's Perspective. We're joined today by Danny Garavito, and so many leaders outside of your world deal with a crisis every once in a while. It's certainly not you're stepping into somebody else's crisis every day, right? They're dealing with one every once in a while, like, hey, a little pandemic, and what do I do about people in the office, or my system has crashed, or a particular product is not performing as well as we expected, things like that. Any advice for business leaders from somebody who's expert in dealing with crises?
I think you need to trust your employees. I think everybody wants to do a good job. Some of us want to do a great job. But you definitely need to figure out what motivates people. And I know from, especially during the last like 2+ years that we've been in this pandemic and my sales job, we went dark in March. And so I was home. And for us, that was completely new. Never worked from, I mean, yes, my office is my house, but I've never had to stay home. Throw kids into it, a whole different mix too. But the reality is finding new ways to be able to get to customers, help customers and everything else, and reach out to them. I think it's important to trust your employees and maybe know, more hope probably, that they're doing the right thing. But I think if you give everybody a sense of independence and let them figure out, how can I grow? How can I get better? How can I make the best out of a situation? People will shine through. People will find what works and what doesn't work, and there has to be the flexibility to that as well. I think it's understanding that no one operates in the same mode. And when things do change and a crisis kicks in, you'll notice some people are all in. I'm here. What do you need from me? And then there will be some people who retreat a little bit, want to survey the scene, see what's going on, and then we'll figure out how they can best place themselves back into this new world that we've had, from work from home and stuff.
Okay. So let's talk about a hot topic right now, which is a crisis in EMS itself at the moment. And since the pandemic, we found that a lot of people have been burnt out and have stepped out of the world of emergency medical services. So there's a hiring and staffing crisis right now in this field. There is in every field, but I think it's actually worse in EMS than many others. It's having an effect on retention and professionalism. So what more can you share about what's going on and how your organizations are combating that?
I think the biggest thing that we're up against, well, it used to be pay. We have seen a change with that in the last, year or two, where there have been raises that have been given. The minimum wage, being raised helped a lot in those situations. I also think too that EMS is seen as a stepping stone for many that want to become a firefighter, a police officer, get into nursing or other areas of healthcare. And being an EMT or in EMS is usually that first opportunity to get patient care or direct patient contact hours. So they'll use it for that reason. So we have many people for a very short period of time because it is a stepping stone and they're moving on to something else. The other issue we have, though, is I don't want to say a lack of education, but in EMS, there is a requirement. There is a need to have critical thinking skills, critical decision-making skills. And a lot of people don't come to the table with that skill set. I think you learn it over a period of time. You learn it from being placed in certain situations, interacting with different people. But being able to prioritize what is important and what is not so important is a big part of EMS, because that's what we do. We triage out in situations and stuff like that. It also goes beyond the fact that, the age spectrum in EMS. We have a lot of dinosaurs that fit the criteria of a dinosaur, believe it or not. But the reality is we also have very young folks in EMS now that really aren't sure what they want to do in their life. they're testing this out. They went to class for 3 or 4 months. They got their EMT. Now they are an EMT to get the job on the ambulance. And that's really where they figure out, is this for me or not? We not only need to recruit people in EMS and give opportunities to younger folks before they even get to EMT class, and I'm talking middle school and high school, to give them a skill set of being able to make a difference and make critical decisions in a second that they may be able to get, whether it's through groups in school, mock trial competitions would be a big one, drama, things where it forces them to constantly be thinking and not just a sit back and wait
Right.
type of a
Yeah.
feeling.
I actually think it's been getting worse in that the ability to make critical decisions and interact. We have to form a relationship with anyone that we see on scene, and that skill is being lost in this world where students had been in school virtually for a few years, and people are spending more time at home on their phones interacting electronically. There is no interacting over the phone in EMS. It just doesn't exist. You have to form this rapport in person. So that's a skill definitely with people coming out of school that's being lost.
Absolutely. I mean, I had an EMT the other day. We had a conversation. She was going to follow up with me about something. And she's like, "Oh, I'll be sure to text you." I turned around, I looked at her, and I laughed. And I said, "Just call me." That even that conversation will go so much
Right.
farther, I thought to myself, than her just shooting out a text with 2 or 3 lines. Yes, I'll get the information. But the reality is I want to hear the inflection of the voice. I want to know, what her feeling is about the information. And I think that carries a lot when there's just a conversation that you don't get. But so many people are relying on devices and everything else, and even on calls, right? Staring at the iPad if they're putting patient information in. I tell everybody, take pictures
Right.
of stuff, like the patient's driver's license, stuff like that, with the iPad, and just put it all in later. There has to be those communication skills. They're essential.
Picked up the phone and called somebody the other day for a business meeting, and I just needed to follow up. And the person answered the phone. And they said, "Wow," they said, "phone call. This is old school." Watch it, buddy. So, how does in again in this world there is also a mix of paid and volunteer. So how does volunteerism come into play in all of this, and is it making things better or worse?
Oh, I think they make it better no matter what. I'll take extra hands on a call any day of the week. But the reality is that there's a lot of turnover with the volunteers. Someone comes into an organization, they want to ride, they want to do calls. Maybe it's not a busy service, so they're not getting as many calls as they want to. They go somewhere else. The other issue we have with the volunteers, though, is that people need to work. People go out to their jobs every day too. Or volunteering means time away from your family during your downtime at home and everything else, because you're running out the door because of a call and the pager going off. But I think we also don't tap into a lot of groups, especially in your area, groups that are there that are looking to not only volunteer, but maybe get into just EMS in general as a paid person. And I've always said that there's a population in northern Westchester that's looking for work, that doesn't necessarily want to go out every day and do hard labor out in the road or in people's yards and stuff like that, and offering those educational opportunities to others who are able to work but are just looking to do something else, and give them a different skill set. And I think also too is that we have to realize that the demographics are changing in some areas. People are speaking different languages. A lot of our volunteers, speak one language, don't speak many. Rarely do I get volunteers who speak multiple languages. But I think it's important for us to sort of grow our group so that when we do have a patient from a different background or speaking a different language, that we're best able to help them if we can better understand
I agree.
them.
But all of what you've said raises a serious issue, which is we need people who want to serve, you need people who have critical thinking skills, who are intelligent, who have decent math skills in many cases. You have to do math, actually do math in this field.
Yeah.
Who have good interpersonal skills. It's also a physical job. Maybe be bilingual. These are a lot of things. And then when you look at, forget volunteer, when you look at what EMTs and paramedics are paid in this country, that in and of itself is a crisis. And everyone should know that the people that are showing up at your door to help you when you call 911 are not doing this for the money, because they're not making nearly enough money and they're not paid enough. And so recruiting into this world is incredibly difficult. And recruiting the people with the best skills is certainly even more difficult. So as you said, it's a stepping stone. So when you do get those very best people, and I've seen them come through, they're on their way to, to a corporate world, or on their way to PA school or medical school or something else. And even for the high school students, some of whom are exceptional, are doing this to help them get into college. So it's very
Absolutely.
difficult. And I think our country has to do a better job in thinking about compensation in these in this critical area.
Yeah, they definitely need to be incentivized to come into the world of EMS. And I think in a lot of jobs, not just EMS, and a lot of jobs, and entry jobs and stuff like that, we're probably not paying people what they should be making. But I think the reality is that, it's also important to have a loyalty to the company that you're working for, to put in time, to be compensated well over the years, have an opportunity to get, assessments done, or a review, and get a raise as well. And I think employers owe it to their employees to really, truly give feedback and let it be a 360 feedback, managers and employees, and also offer the opportunity, though, to whether they get, promoted to a supervisor spot or a senior medic, or whether they, just get up in what they're making per hour, because it is not.
Sure. So last question for you. Can you tell us about 1 to 2 leaders who you've learned from along the way, either good or bad, right? We see leaders sometimes who are not great leaders, and we learn what not to do, but either good or bad. What did they teach? Who were they, and what did they teach you?
So I did have a guy when I was at the University of Maryland who he ran the Central Judicial Board, which I was on. It was a board that suspended and expelled students from the university for various reasons. But John Zacher was one of those people who did a great job in getting us together as a group, because that's what we functioned at. It usually was a panel of 3 or 4 of us. And we all listened to the same story of what had happened with that student, or what went on in that incident. And the thing, though, is that we all have our own interpretation of things when we don't get to see it firsthand. And John was very good at getting us together as a group and taking all of the different perspectives of the 3 or 4 of us that were sitting on the panel, and giving us an opportunity to talk about what we saw, which then provided a different opportunity to the people that you were sitting with. And a lot of times, if people don't hear it from somebody else, yes, you can hear it from the student, but then to how I processed the information that I got from the student and what my feedback was, that really made a difference. You sometimes just need to hear it a second time. And what I was able to infer from a conversation then allowed them to realize, oh, I didn't pick up on that. Because so many times when we listen to others speak, we're constantly thinking of, how can I respond? Mm-hmm. But when you look at it from different perspectives, it's not how can I respond to it, it's all right, what else do I need to know? So I would say that guy, John Zacher, at the Central Judicial Board, was one of them who really led us to make decisions that weren't just cut and dry, but looking at all different perspectives of what the problem was or what the issue was. Because in the end, It's a person you're making a decision about. And that's what should be at the forefront. You're dealing with a person. John's back.
Love that.
Thank you. Number 2 would be my dad.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like the most obvious answer to say and everything else, but I think the reason is just my dad was one of those who just could look at facts or listen to people or come up with a decision that was maybe not quite what everyone else expected in the room. And I think a lot of that has to do with experience. I don't think we value the experience that people have sometimes or what they actually bring to the table. I think when people approach a table with a group of people, they know what they have, and they may have a tendency to just think about what they're able to bring. But you need to understand that sometimes it's what other people bring to the table. Maybe they've done this for 20, 25 years. I look at myself as a paramedic, and I joke on scene. I'm sorry, I've only done this for 25 years. But it's also knowing that sometimes we need to know how to actually get somebody, we need to get this cement block off of this person's leg. And there's maybe somebody in the crowd who knows how to do that. So one thing my dad is very good at is appreciating others' experience to come up with a decision that would be best for everyone and then moving forward with it. So I like him as a
Fantastic. I love that. Well, Danny, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. We've learned a lot, and you are beyond humble. You are a true hero in our community, and thank you for your service and for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was truly a pleasure.
Thanks again. Thank you again to Dwyer Garavito for joining us today. She is absolutely being humble and an extreme professional. I have personally witnessed Danny handle patients in crisis and extraordinary traumas and cardiac arrests with the utmost of calm and professionalism while making patients feel better and feel connected with the team. So she's a phenomenal provider, and we were very lucky to hear from her today. As always, at the end of the Leaders Perspective podcast, I like to recap a few things that we learned from our guest, and so I captured 4 things that I learned from Danny today. First is assess the scene, assess the situation. Don't rush in, take a moment, think about what's going on, and then you can empower your people and appreciate your people to take charge. But take that time, assess what's going on, and don't rush right in. You'll have a better outcome when you do that. Connected to that, you don't always need to intervene when others have a situation under control. Monitor and assess their performance, but if they're doing a good job, let them get it done. The third, listen to what people are saying. Listen carefully, but don't listen to react. Listen for facts and listen for context. Perhaps there's a solution to a problem that isn't cut and dry and that can be applied to the situation. So again, listen not to react, but listen for facts and context so that you can come out with the best solution. And lastly, make every interaction a teaching opportunity. And I love this one, and it's often it's something that I personally talk about a lot with people when I talk about leadership. It keeps people engaged. So let people manage, then talk afterwards, regroup, and talk about whether things could have been done differently or more efficiently. In the medical world, there is a phrase called see one, do one, teach one, and I love that in business as well. You're basically seeing a procedure, you're doing it once yourself, and then you're teaching somebody else. And it is the notion that everyone is a mentor and a mentee at every stage in their career. So this was a wonderful episode of The Leader's Perspective. Again, thank you very much to Danny Garavito for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Leader's Perspective podcast. As always, have a great day and be your best self.
Thanks for listening to the Leader's Perspective podcast, brought to you by Accel Advisors. Visit accel-advisors.com for more information about our growth, turnaround, optimization, risk, and HR advisory services.
The Leader's Perspective is produced by Accel Advisors, LLC,
and is available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.